Good morning and welcome to Caretaker's Corner, where we discuss everything that has to do with taking care of your elderly and disabled parents, disabled spouses, and adult disabled children. My name is CJ and I'm your host for this program. And we're going to get ready and start a little bit of a series. I seem to like series on grieving and the grieving process. Because not only do you grieve for the loss of a loved one, but you and your loved one also grieves for the loss of health and the loss of life and the loss of livelihood that take place when someone becomes sick and disabled. So there's a lot of, you've got your added stress of, I've got all this extra stuff to do because now they can't do it. And, our finances got cut in half. So now we have to figure out how to lower our spending and, be able to make the money go further or pay the same amount of bills with less money. And that's very difficult, I'll let you know. But you also have to grieve for the loss of the life that you've had together. And that can be very hard. And you don't realize that it's a grieving process. Most people think, okay, well, we're going to tackle this. We're going to do what we can. And they don't understand that all that added emotion they're feeling is grief. And it is can be severely debilitating. So we are going to go over, I probably am not pronouncing this correctly, but Kubler-Ross model, which has 5 stages of grieving. And so we're going to go over a quick thing today with a description of each of them. And then in the next several weeks, I'll do a video for each of them. The 1-year anniversary for the channel is coming up, so I will do a video for that on the Sunday the 13th, because we actually started on the 14th. So there are 5 stages of grieving. There's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And you're going through these processes, and your spouse or your parent are going through these processes. And depending on when your child became disabled, they could be going through this process. Like in the case of my brother, he didn't become disabled until he was, 20, 21, somewhere in that range. So he went through all these processes at that point. And so did my mother and my father, who were taking care of him, primarily my mom until I got there. So it is possible for an adult disabled child to go through it, providing they weren't disabled their whole lives. Now, if they're disabled their whole lives, they probably aren't going through all of these because they have grown up that way. So that is just their life. Whereas when you've had a full life, you and your spouse, you work together, you've built a family, you've built a house, you go on vacations together, you're able to share the responsibilities in the house as well as the financial responsibilities, as well as the gardening, the shopping, all of this has been shared. You go on vacations together and you make decisions together, financial and otherwise. And all of a sudden, it's 90% on you, maybe even more percent. And on top of that, you're probably the one that has to do the majority of the work. So you've got to make decisions. What do I chuck? What do I keep? I like fresh produce and everything, but I can't have a garden because I don't have time to have one. And so there was a time when we had a small garden and Barbara and I both took care of it, but she can't help. And it's one of those things I had to go, I can't do this. And when we make decisions in the house now about stuff that we're going to do, we have to make decisions. And we've got 2 disabled folks in our house and 2 non-disabled folks. And we have to ask ourselves, am I and Robin able to do this by ourselves, or is this something that we just don't need to get involved in? And that is one of those decisions you're going to have to use in the future. So going over this, the first stage is denial. And this is basically disbelief and shock. It allows us to cope with the overwhelming emotions of the situation. And denying the conditions, diagnosis, and everything that has to do with it. And this is not just, like I said, I'm not even dealing with death here, although that is part of it. But I am mainly dealing with just the sickness and the when a spouse becomes sick or disabled, often both, how your life changes. And you go through each of these stages and it doesn't have to be in the same order, and they can last different. I mean, I wish I could give you a simple formula that says, all right, you're going to be in this stage for this long, you're going to be in the next stage for this long, but the simple fact is you're not. It varies depending upon the situation, upon the people involved, upon how active was the person to begin with. If they were very sedentary and their condition is going to cause them to be very sedentary, they're probably not going to go through most of these because their life really isn't changing that much. They just now have a condition that they have to deal with. Whereas if they had a very active life and they were up, moving around, doing all sorts of stuff, running, exercising, all that, and then suddenly they can't, they're going to go through these stages a lot harder. So stage 1 is denial. Stage 2 is anger. And this is one of those difficult stages because, number 1, let's hope you don't have an angry person to begin with because it will be way worse. But number 2, you're going to be angry and they're going to be angry. And the idea is you shouldn't be angry at each other. And you're going to have to fall back to, previously I've discussed having rules of communication, and rules about anger in communication is very important. But you got to remember, you're not actually mad at them and they're not mad at you. You all are combined mad at the situation you're in. And that's what you got to remember. You're not mad at each other. You're mad at the situation. However, you're both going to lash out. So you need to remember to go back to some of those. I've got a video on just scream. You might want to review that so that way you can take off in your car and scream, exercise, do something, but get that anger out. Seek therapy is the biggest thing I tell everybody about everything. So your next stage is bargaining. And this is where you're begging your higher power, please, if you do this, I'll go back to church. Or if you do this, if you make them better, I'll donate more money. And it doesn't work, but it makes you feel better. So you want to remember it's an important part of the process. And this is a part where people can go a little off the deep end, going further to their religious beliefs, and I have no problem with anyone's religious beliefs, so remember that. But a lot of people start seeking higher power during this stage in hopes that if they bargain it enough, the higher power will make everything better. And that is your belief system, and like I said, I have no problem with anyone's belief system, but just remember that you can't bargain your way out of most situations. You have to actually do the work. So the next stage is depression. Now, if you have somebody who's already depressed, this can be a difficult stage to pay attention to because your depression through grief is normal. It has a bit of time period behind it, and it can vary, and the extremeness of the depression can vary. But if you have somebody who's already clinically depressed, you need to understand that this could make things worse. And you need to contact their therapists and their doctors as soon as you can to let them know what is going on and that you guys are going through this process. Because they may, if they're medicated, they may have to adjust medication. And if they're not medicated, they may want to increase therapy sessions or possibly add some medication. When Barbara was diagnosed with her condition, I had a conversation with our doctor about getting her on medication, so that we could offset any depression and issues such as that, because her condition has a high rate of suicide. So we wanted to nip that one in the bud as fast as we could. Also, the fact that we have a tight circle here in our household of people that we can depend upon and talk to helps out quite a bit. But I also suggest you have somebody outside of your immediate household or family unit that you can talk to, because sometimes you just need somebody that's not involved in the situation to talk to, which is why I also suggest therapy. Do not feel like, there should never be therapy shaming, but as a society, we have in the past shamed people for going to therapy. And I'm telling you, it is one of the best things you can do. Find a counselor, find a therapist, talk, get it out. Get it out of yourself. Now, the last stage of grief is acceptance, and this is obviously what it sounds like. You've come to terms with the situation, whether it be a death or whether it be a loss of the life that you've known, but you have come to terms and you're ready to move forward. Now, this is where you're really able to start tackling those big things, like how are we going to readjust our lives to deal with your situation? I said we have 2 disabled people in my house. One is obviously Barbara, and the other one's my best friend, Melissa. And with her situation, she can't really bend over a lot. So we're having to remodel the house in order to make everything she has to get to higher. And it's one of those things you don't think about until you're in that situation. But we've moved to the point where we're able to start going, okay, this is what we need to do to make the house better for her. And so those are some of the steps we're making because we've come to the acceptance stage. Now, here's the other thing about grief. You can go back through the stages. You can have to revisit one of the stages, and you think you're done with it, you think you're over the grief, and suddenly you're back in denial, or you're back in anger or bargaining or depression, or you can recircle back through the stages of grief. And so you want to keep that in mind, okay? Just because you think you're through it, you may not be. The grief, especially in the loss of a loved one, that someone has passed away, that could take months or years. All right. So don't think that just because you're feeling better today that, you're over the grief, and then tomorrow you wake up and it hits again and you don't feel like getting out of bed. It's still part of the grieving process. Okay. You're going to have your good days and you're going to have your bad days. And the idea is slowly but surely you're going to have more good days than bad days. All right. And it, like I said, it could take months, like in the case of my dad passing. It didn't take all that long for me to get over most of the grief. But when my brother passed, I stayed drunk for quite a while because I couldn't handle it. I worked myself to death because as long as I was doing 2 jobs and going to school full time, I didn't have to think about it that much. So we all have our own ways of handling grief. Try to be positive about it and try to stay, I'm not going to say, have a positive attitude, but try and make sure that you don't do a lot of destructive behavior, like getting drunk every night, but try and find more healthy outlets for your grieving process. Like I said, we're going to be doing about 8 videos or so on this. So I'm going to tackle each subject, each stage separately, and go more in depth on them. So I hope this video has helped you. If you have any questions about the grieving process, I am not a counselor, but I will try my best to answer any of them. Just shoot it in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with anyone you know. And please be kind. Have a nice day.